really go down because it costs, yeah, because it goes down.
But everything is everything.
So I see it like that. Because when I come here, I cut through it. This is the whole trail. But that's not what I this is the how they do it. Yeah, because that trail comes through here. We can't pass this. Yeah, the connection this way. So we talk to water.
Okay, so let's get started. You can sign in. You want to sign in? Get a pen. Just be sure to hang out with the pen. So thank you very much for coming, folks, and happy Bike to Work Month. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But I'm Phil Von Hake, and I work in the Mobile Sources program over in the Air Pollution Control. And my main job is the Vehicle Emissions Inspection Program that everybody loves to hate. But luckily, my boss and my program manager realized that there's more to reducing mobile sources of emissions than just inspecting the cars that are already out there. There's getting people to drive less with bus and riding bikes. So luckily, they realized that. And so you may remember over the last couple of years, I've given a couple of, or held a couple of very basic bike commuting 101 style lunch and learns, and they're good, but we've had some guys come in from bike shops and they bring in $80 tires and $5,000 bikes, and a lot of jaws drop because we're humble state employees that don't have that kind of money. And so that got me thinking, along with a couple other things that we'll bring up here also, that bikes are for everybody, not just people who can afford $5,000 bikes and things like that. So I truly believe, since we're here at the health department and we have our 10 winnable battles, that bikes obviously can knock out two of them very easily: obesity, and when compared to driving, air quality. Stay with me on this one. As far as clean water goes, anyone go down along the creek path last week when it was raining under Colorado Boulevard and see that spout with the stuff coming out of there? Okay? That's not runoff from bikes, that's runoff from cars. So get people out of their cars on bikes, they'll have less of that kind of runoff. And also, I at least have some, have heard some anecdotes here and there. When you think about how many bike trails are along creeks, Cherry Creek, Platte River, Bear Creek, et cetera, it's hard to tell which one causes the other, but it helps clean up that area of the river, and that's the water quality as well. So there's not, I couldn't find any hard data about that, but go with me on that one. The asterisks are next to disease and injury prevention, not exclusively about bikes, but about exercise in general, gets you in better shape so you don't just break a bone because you haven't been working out in a long time, that kind of thing. And to be healthier in general. And I know that mental health and substance abuse is more about, not drug use prevention and things like that. But I know I'm not the only one who in here who thinks taking a bike ride just really helps clear your head in general. And if you don't believe me, just ask Albert. Okay? So I've been thinking about, what I don't know about most people think about bikes, but in my idea, too many people think bikes were either just a kid's toy or, you know, the Tour de France and the big boys. And actually, I took that picture just yesterday out on the creek path. Yeah. But bikes are for more than just these groups. It's not just something you just put away once you grow up. And it's not something that you have to do the hardcore racing style also. Also, I love this term. We met a couple weeks ago with Ken Gart, the governor's volunteer BikesAre, and he wants to expand the bike community far beyond the mammals. I don't expect you to be able to read that, but mammals are middle-aged males in lycra spandex. And we got to move far beyond that. I thought about wearing the jersey, but I'm just leaving it up there. So, yeah. So just as a couple of examples of well, for lack of a better word, excuses I've heard in the past. So I can't bike, I'm either out of shape or whatever. But this guy, Ernest Gagnon in the lower left, blows me away. He weighed 500 pounds a couple of years ago. He was about to get gastric bypass surgery, and he said, "No, I'm going to take up cyclocross." And if anyone knows what cyclocross is, it's a particularly intense form of racing that I'll never do. You hop on your bike over a fence and ride it up a hill through the mud and all that. He's down below 300 pounds now, and he's still at it. And I'm honest, I'm following him on Facebook, and he still admire the heck out of him. Oh, I'm too old for a bike. Well, there's the Cobras, Colorado Bike Riding Association for Seniors. They do rides. If you remember Eric Waymeyer, the first blind man to reach the top of Mount Everest, there he is doing the Leadville 100 a couple of years ago on the back of the tandem. His partner said, when you lean, be sure to lean to the left. So, and then the Wounded Warrior Project, you might see a bunch of different kinds of bikes adapted for people who don't still have all four limbs. So those kind of bikes are out there also. I had invited some folks from Bike Denver. They couldn't make it, but they send their best, and they have been huge in improving the infrastructure for bikes, where people are thinking, oh, I have to ride on the street. Well, yes and no. You may have seen the protected bike lane on 15th Street with these pylons here. It's been a huge improvement in riding down that street. The Sharrows on the upper left there are probably my single favorite thing to happen with bike lanes. It's just get cars realizing, oh, there are going to be more bikes out on this street without having to paint an entire line all the way down the street. There's now bike parking right here on South Pearl. They took out, it looks like an equivalent of about 2 or 3 parking spaces, and you can fit that many bikes in there. They took out 1 parking space, and there's over 10 bikes in there. And there are more of those popping up. And that's a picture of the bridge over I-25 going from Central Platte Valley into Lower Highlands. I couldn't find a picture of one ready to go of the one over I-25 that'll open this summer, but more of those bridges are popping up. So there's a lot more infrastructure that just isn't just for cars. You don't have to ride the entire way. So if you think you live too far, put your bike on the front of an RTD bus or on the end of one of the cars on a light rail train. I have kids to take daycare. I do not, but when people say that, you know, a lot of families are starting to take their kids to daycare that way instead of the back of the minivan. And I think this is something we're going to see a lot more of in the years coming up. This is an electric bike with the motor and the battery, or the battery's there and the motor's there in the crank, and you can do a good 20 or 25 miles an hour on those things just with the throttle. And you can pedal when you want. You can do both at the same time. I've been talking with a couple transportation planners who are talking about, you know, bikes as a last mile solution. I go, this is an electric bike. This is a last 10 miles solution. Okay? So going back to the idea, oh, it's too expensive. Well, sure, there are plenty of very expensive bike shops out there, but I love the Bike Depot here, and Clark, right in the second row, is not only works here, but is a volunteer at the Bike Depot. He can tell you more about it, but you can volunteer your way to your own bike. Lots of good used bikes and equipment, right? Anything else? They have classes also.
maintenance classes, full tear down classes,
Right.
safety classes.
Right.
Used bikes start, 200.
There you go. There you go. So thank you for that. And then if you can wait till October, my version of Black Friday every year is Velo Swap at the National Western Complex. They get 5,000 or 10,000 people there. It's sort of like a bikes only garage sale. A bunch of pro teams show up and just sell stuff their sponsors gave them that they never used over the year for pennies on the dollar. I personally got a $4,000 bike there a couple years ago for $1,700. It was 6 months old. So those kind of deals are everywhere. And places like the Bike Depot, and I've heard of Velo Swaps popping up a little more often than just the one time a year. And there are a lot of events out there too. You may have heard about the Denver Cruiser rides that are coming back on Wednesday nights. There's a different theme every night, or every week, like superhero or duct tape and tin foil. People dressed up and all that riding. And then of course there's beer, New Belgium with the Tour de Fat every year. Both of these rides go about 3 miles an hour. So you will not get dropped with these rides. So Kira here is one of our volunteers, and she's done an incredible job. I don't expect you to be able to read that, which is why we have these right up here about overcoming bike community concerns. Kind of all the same issues I brought up in the last couple of slides, but please check those out. And this will be the first of several lunch and learns. I have this on flyers in all the hallways and the wellness bulletin boards, and so we'll have a lot more, get into a lot more details on that. We are starting a CDPH Bikes group. It can't be an official employee resource group for whatever reason. They can't have like sports specific, but we are forming a group. I see Rick here is leading the Tour de Cure, right? In August. So he'll have the CDPHE team for that. We do have an intranet page under the employee resources section. It's still empty right now, but I'm getting some other volunteers to populate the page. For example, the video from this event, you'll be able to link to it from that page. And a lot more of these resources will be on there also. And like I said, this will be the first of several lunch and learns around bikes, mostly on Tuesday afternoons, leading up to Bike to Work Day, June 24th. That's a Wednesday. And we'll have a huge wellness celebration out in Creekside Park. If you've seen the events that Dan McKenna has put on in previous years, this one's going to be at least that big. The Glendale Police Department makes pancakes in the morning, and there's a go-home station with water at the like 4:30 to 6, so it'll be a huge event. Do encourage you to get out there, whether you have a bike or not. The wellness celebration is just around Bike to Work Day, but it's there for everybody. So we have a bunch of new ideas coming up among volunteers. Kira and Dan and Clark have been great with the ideas they've been throwing out. And please add those to, we have a CDPHE Bikes folder on the Google Drive. Just trust me, it's there. Just search on that in Google Drive and you'll get to the folder. Everybody with a state COUS address can get in there and add things. We have a spreadsheet that we've been just adding tons of stuff to with volunteers for Bike to Work Day, in the intranet, in the group, and other things. So we're going to make this a thing. We're going to make it go beyond Bike to Work Day and make bikes a much more integral part of the Department of Public Health and Environment, where, again, I think bikes are a huge part of the solution. So you may have noticed in most of the slides I had there that it's pretty male dominated. So thank goodness our guest speaker is here. I just heard about Sarai Snyder and her events in the last week and was blown away. She had, I guess, some events that were worldwide just this past weekend. And I'm glad she's here to join us now to talk about the power of the pedal. So please welcome Sarai Snyder.
Thank you for having me I'm so excited to hear about these efforts from this department to bring bicycles into everyday lives. So I would love to ask you some questions first to get started. So how many of you consider yourselves a bike rider? Okay, great. Now, is this for sport? Who rides for sport? Like for competition, like to race? Okay, a little bit, good, all right. And what about commuting? Bike commuting? Awesome. And then what about leisure? Who likes to just ride? Okay, so I'm excited. We have a lot of bike riders in this room, and so you're going to get what I'm talking about, I hope. So this is an awesome place to start. But what I like to think about when I think about bicycle advocacy, basically, is oftentimes the challenges come up. We're all in this place where we're constantly looking for better infrastructure. We're looking for more funding for projects and to encourage more people to get on bikes. But one of the things that we tend to forget about, oops, how do I do this? Next.
Oh, just click on the pad, yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that we tend to forget about is the stories and why are we here? Why do we want more people to ride bikes outside of the environmental reasons and the health benefits? Why do we need policies to change? Why do we need more support? Why do we need more people riding bikes? And I think that's what I get really excited about. The thing that grips me the most about actually riding a bike is just the beauty of the story. And being out on the ride, sometimes it's the end of the day and we're releasing all of that bad stuff that we collected through the day, through the office, through the internet, through the computer, and we get to take that break between work and home, and we get to unload all of those things just by pedaling a bicycle. We're all taught lessons growing up through stories, and I truly believe in storytelling and telling that the best stories are the things that get people excited and interested. It's not so much about the gear or the projects. It's about telling really good stories. We're all taught lessons growing up through fairy tales, through campfire stories, or at least that's been the tradition, right? So Pinocchio taught us that lying brings consequences. The Ugly Duckling taught us to never judge a book by its cover. And then we have the tortoise and the hare that taught us that slow and steady wins the race, or at least maybe not a bike race, but maybe in the long run. But we're usually at our best and our most powerful as advocates for whatever it is that we're advocating for when we can tell a really good story, when we can tell something that people connect to and they want to get to know. So I personally believe that bicycles make for healthier, happier, smarter people. And I think that across the board, we can all say that that's something that we want, right? So what I'm going to do today is just kind of tell you some of my favorite stories, some of the things that some of the people that I've come across, and why bicycles are so important to our future. This picture right here, this is Shannon Galpin. Some of you may have heard of her. She runs an organization called Mountain to Mountain. She actually lives in Breckenridge, so she's here in Colorado. She this past year got National Geographic Adventurer of the Year. She's a pretty amazing woman. She just recently started Afghan Cycles. She's a huge advocate for women's rights, and since Afghanistan has been identified as the worst place in the entire world to be a woman, she decided to start her work there. So in Afghanistan, they have this thing that's called the third gender. So it's applied to a foreign woman most of the time. And this is when that woman is extended the same rights that she has in her own country. So she's treated like she would be in the US. So because of that, she gets to actually sit down at the table with men. And so she has a much greater opportunity to break down some of the barriers for women. In Afghanistan, it's not accepted for women to ride bikes. This picture right here is Shannon in Afghanistan. This is when she rode her bike across the Panjshir Valley in Afghanistan. And all along the way, she was given the opportunity to talk to everyone. And this was the first time that a lot of children and men had been exposed to women riding bicycles. So it was a really big deal. So 4 years later, they have just formed the first Afghan women's cycling team. These women risk their lives to ride a bike, but they do it for the freedom, for the independence, and for the opportunity. So they're not just opening doors for themselves, but for women all across Afghanistan. And then this is India. In Bihar, India, in 2007, the literacy rate for girls was just 53% of, that's 20 points lower than what it was for boys. So girls were given a bicycle in an effort to boost poor secondary school attendance. So in just 4 years, the number of girls attending school tripled. The program was soon adopted in neighboring states, and in 2012, India began working to adopt the program on a national level. So for these girls, the bicycle made it possible for them to travel that average of about 5 miles to get to school to attain an education without actually creating a burden for the families. And as a matter of fact, the bicycles became a huge benefit for the families because they used the bicycles outside of just acquiring education, but the bicycle was used in the afternoon and in the evenings after school hours to run errands and to do other things that the family needed to do. This is Team Rwanda. You may be familiar with Team Rwanda. If not, I hope that you will search for the movie Rising from the Ashes. It's one of the most incredible films that I've ever seen in my entire life. It's just such a beautiful story. The movie chronicles the rise of Team Rwanda from 2006 grassroots bike race that was created. And you'll see in the movie that some of the locals were riding on wooden bicycles. So this is, it was pretty basic, let's just say. But the story goes all the way up to when Adrian Nayashuti attended the 2012 Olympics representing Rwanda. Adrian himself said that their hope is to change the story of Rwanda from that of a horrible genocide that wiped out about 10% of the population to one of a proud, unified community around the accomplishments in cycling. And now the cool part is that they're actually focusing on women in Rwanda and Ethiopia and Eritrea. And the goal there is to send a female cyclist to the 2016 Olympics. And I get to hear all sorts of wonderful stories about this, and it's going pretty well. So hopefully that's going to happen. But the focus is not just on young girls to get to the Olympics, but the realization that filling their lungs with fresh air, encouraging their spirits, and opening their minds to the possibilities is keeping them in school. And it's helping to avoid early teen marriage and pregnancy. So now we're going to come to the U.S. This is Kristen Gavin. She's in Philadelphia, and she heads up a program called Gearing Up. While she was working on her master's degree, she started a fitness program for residents of Interim House, which is a residential and outpatient drug and rehab facility for women in Philadelphia. So she's an elite bike racer herself, but she noticed the impact that bicycles were having on women in the program, and it was like nothing else. So in the 4th year of operation, she provides women in transition from abuse, addiction, and incarceration with a bicycle. And this is for exercise, transportation, and personal growth. So you can see some of the women here in the program. The results are showing much higher levels of self-efficacy, lower levels of depression, and one of the women from Gearing Up, one of the graduates, said, "Once I started riding a bike, I became a different person. I see so many positive changes in myself. So obviously a lot of these stories that I'm telling you today are about women. It's definitely my passion to get more women riding bikes. And that brings me to my personal story, and I'll try really hard not to cry. Just get emotional about these things. So this is my very first bike. I grew up in Kentucky, in the country, and so for me, riding a bicycle wasn't about riding on roads or on the pavement. It was literally riding around in the farm. But like many kids, as I grew up, I left my bike behind. So several years later, but I was always a really active kid, but several years later, I got my first mountain bike. And this is one of my first mountain bike trips. This is, I can't remember where this is actually, it's in Kentucky. But I got to go with a bunch of friends. And a lot of people kind of said that once I went out for my first mountain bike ride, I never really came back. I was just a completely different person. And this is where bicycles changed my personal life. After college, I kind of floated around for a little, this was before college, by the way. But I kind of took a break from riding for a little while. But after college, I was a little bit unsure of what I wanted to do. I was a very creative person. I went to art school, but I wasn't really sure how to apply a lot of this in my everyday life. And I just became unfocused and unconnected and confused about where my direction was going. But one day I decided, I just really need to start riding my bike again. That's the one thing that I can do is start riding my bike. And so that's really when my mind shifted, because when I ride a bike, it gives me focus. It helps me to bring that attention back into place. And one of my favorite quotes is from Elsa von Blumen. And she's one of the first American female bike racers. We're talking about the late 1800s. She said, "Success in life depends as much upon a vigorous and healthy body as upon a clear and active mind." So soon I started working at a bike shop. And through working at that bike shop, I started to recognize the impact that riding a bike had on so many other people around me. So, let's see. So, it changed my life in a way that nothing else could. And the more I worked in the bike shop and the more I contacted or connected with other women and other people who were just getting started riding, I noticed the ways that it was starting to change their lives as well. So then I moved to Boulder, Colorado, and that's when I started Girl Bike Club, because I wanted so badly to share this story with so many other women, to encourage them to ride bikes as well. So one of the things that I learned along the way is that through this progression, there's more to it than just being happier and healthier, but there was a true empowerment that I found. All of a sudden I had a voice, I had a focus, I had things that I wanted to do. I wanted to create change. And I believe that that's what happens. So, this is a little bit more about what I do now. I think I'm missing a couple slides, but it's not really a big deal. So, about 5 years ago, I started a website called Girl Bike Club, and the intention there was to share cycling with women and to give them that platform and that community to learn and to ride bicycles. But again, there's so many challenges. There's a lot of inequality when it comes to the sport of cycling. There's also a certain level of discomfort that a lot of women experience when they go into a bike shop. It can be a very male-dominated sport industry. It can be a really uncomfortable place. But that's not just for women. It's generally beginners across the board. Anytime that it's like going to buy a car, right? I mean, how many of us know that much about cars to know that we're making the right decision? So you have to depend pretty heavily on the person that's in the shop, and most of them tend to be men. So we wanted to create this place where women could come and learn and ask questions, and that's what Girl Bike Love is. But again, I was hearing over and over, it was all about the challenges, and we don't have equal pay for women racing bikes, and we don't have enough gear, we don't have enough this, we don't have enough that. And I thought, man, the thing is that we just really need to celebrate riding bicycles. So that's when I started CycloFem, and so that was just mentioned. CycloFem is a global women's cycling day, and here we go. So it started 4 years ago, and it started with a very simple invitation, which was come ride with us. Because we believe that if you teach women to ride, that they will change the world. That first year, we had 164 rides in 14 countries. This happens on Mother's Day every year. So this past Sunday was our fourth annual CycloFem. And if you have the opportunity, if you're on Instagram or anything like that, if you search for the hashtag CycloFem, you'll see all these amazing photos from all over the world. Not everybody uses Instagram, but a lot of people do. So there's pictures from Colombia and Brazil and Vienna and Eritrea. I think that there was a ride in Ethiopia as well. Guam. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So we've spread to over 30 countries now. And like I said, it all comes back to this simple invitation to come ride with us. And we like to say that this is regardless of gender, age, race, or bicycle preference. Because our goal is to celebrate women riding bikes, not to discourage anyone from riding. So anybody's welcome. So here's this was last year, I believe. We have this map that kind of pinpoints where all the rides are all over the world. We're seeing it's kind of interesting because we were in less countries this year. We did a lot less promotion this year, but it's something that's kind of taken a life of its own. And a lot of these rides have grown from 5 people doing it the first year to 200. It's pretty crazy. So we call this our tribe. On Mother's Day, we rode as a tribe of friends, old and new. And this is something that's kind of broken down a lot of barriers. We've had BikesShare in a lot of cities celebrate CycloFem by giving free rides to women on that day. But we've also had, if you see up here on the right-hand corner, that's Peter Sagan, or Sagan, or however you say his name. Yeah, so he, this was the very first year for CycloFem, and he was racing the first day of the Tour of California, and he came across the line, sprinted across the line, won that first stage, and he had a CycloFem tattoo. We have used temporary tattoos, so he had a CycloFem tattoo on his arm. So we really have transcended that gap between the very beginners, those who don't even own their own bikes and use BikesShare, all the way up to professional athletes. So I'm going to tell you a couple of the stories that have come out of this. This is South Sudan. A friend of mine works with Doctors Without Borders, and he was heading to South Sudan. This was 2 years ago, and he was just determined to put on a CycloFem ride when he got there, right? But when he got there, there was only one bike in the camp, and none of the local women knew how to ride a bike. So within a couple weeks, he managed to collect a couple more bikes. I don't know how he did it, but he's very resourceful. So he rallied the nurses in the camp, and they started giving lessons on Sundays leading up to the CycloFem ride. So by the time the day came around, 2 women had learned how to ride a bike. This is where I could just cry, right? So while this might have been the smallest CycloFem ride in the world, I believe that the expression of joy on their faces, this is one of the women, this is kind of a dark photo, but the expression of joy on their faces from learning to ride a bike that day was worth every last bit. These are some of the nurses. This is the South Sudan ride. Okay, on this one, but, okay, so this is going to Rwanda. But, so, I took arrows back up. There we go, thank you. Oh, she's missing, okay. Well, there's a picture of a woman named Kimberly Coates, and that's the one that's missing there. Kimberly Coates works with Team Rwanda in Rwanda. I mentioned the movie Rising from the Ashes. Again, I highly recommend watching it. It's a real tearjerker. So I saw the film, and I wanted to know what was happening in Africa for women, in Rwanda for women riding bikes, see what the challenges were. You know, I'm just always kind of curious with what's going on. So I had a connection to the filmmaker, and so I reached out to him and I asked him, started asking him some questions. And he connected me by email with Kimberly Coates, who works with the program in Rwanda. And she immediately emailed me back. I mean, they're like on a completely different, it's like a different day there. But she emailed me back, and her response was, "Oh my God, I was wearing my CycloFem t-shirt when I got your email." So so this was after the first year. They hadn't participated, but she found out about CycloFem, and she had a t-shirt, and she was all in for year number 2. So that was the beginning of a really, really amazing friendship. And so this is a picture of the CycloFem ride 2 years ago. Last year was absolutely an amazing turnout. They had a CycloFem ride in Rwanda with over 100 people that participated in the ride. And then they had a party afterwards. At the party afterwards, the Minister of Sport showed up. The Minister of Family and I think Gender showed up. And then also the President of the Cycling Federation for the country. So this was, they really truly embraced the whole idea that it really is important to get women riding bikes. So, let's see, what's next? So our other hashtag that we use is We Ride Together. One of the amazing things that's come out of CycloFem is the emails, the stories that I get to hear that people share with me all over the world about how bicycles have changed their lives, about how they want to share, but also how they want to make their communities better. They're emailing me and saying, what can we do better? How can we make our communities stronger? How can we have safer streets, and how can we get more people riding bikes? I've had these emails come from Nepal, Aruba, India, China, Ghana, where else? It's getting bigger now. So Colombia, El Salvador, those are the ones that really have touched me. And the thing is that most of the time, the only thing that I can really offer is support. The only thing that I can really say is that we're all in this together. I can share an inspirational story or two from another part of the world. I can talk about how others have overcome some of these challenges. But the amazing thing about it is most of the time, that's all that they need. That's all that they want to hear, is that we are all facing these similar challenges, and that we are truly actually in this together. So that's really all I wanted to share with you today. I'm encouraging you just to do the same thing, just to tell a really great story. When someone asks you why you ride a bike, or why you think someone else might like riding a bike, share your personal story. Tell them what makes a difference for you. Tell them how it clears your mind and makes you healthier and happier. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you. Do we have the hashtags or websites or anything like that? There they are.
There we go. So those are our Twitter and Instagram accounts. It's girlbikelove.com and then also cyclofem.com. And I would encourage you, this is a really fun time to search for CycloFem on Twitter and Instagram. I mean, people talk about it all year long, but if you see the photos that have shown up just in the last 4 or 5 days, it's just endless. And then there's just so many wonderful stories. We've got, we had some really exciting groups get involved this year. We had, there's a couple of groups called Black Women Do Bike, and they're really anxious to kind of break down that whole idea that Black women don't ride bikes. So it's about telling stories. You know, if we can associate with it, if we can see it, if we can see ourselves as part of it, then we can do it.
Nice. Thank you so much. That's also a very nice segue to something I forgot to mention in my talk, where, I have a colleague who's not here, but said, Phil, all this bike stuff is great, but us black folks just don't bike. And then I read it again in this report that came out, People for Bikes. Are you familiar with Albus Brooks? He just got reelected to Denver City Council District 9, I think up northeast. He has his own story. He's told that he came back from Copenhagen after riding for the entire week or two he was there, and he said, I'm going to start riding. And all of his neighbors looked at him like he's an alien. So he is making this a thing in that part of Denver too, and directing some city money to improving the infrastructure there as well. So thank you for that segue. And got a bunch of stuff here. Please take whatever you like. I got a stack of old bike magazines. I need to get rid of them. Please do us a favor. Do you want to give an update?
I think you already covered everything.
On Bike to Work Day?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. And then also with the other swag that's back there, that is courtesy of Kaylin here from Transportation Solutions. Did you want to say anything?
Sure, yeah. I work at a TMA that covers this region, a Transportation Management Association. There's 7 in Denver. We each kind of cover our own geographic area, and we all work under the umbrella of Dr. Cog, who leads the My Way to Go campaign, mywaytogo.org, and they're responsible for putting on Bike to Work Day here in Denver. So that's a great website to check out as far as wayfinding, not just for biking, but for driving, carpooling, and busing. It lays out all your different options and compares them based on time and money. And I have some resources there in the back, and I also have some RTD tickets, precious RTD tickets to give out to you guys if you want. Just as a reminder that, you know, biking is great, and it's also great to, if you can work it in with a bus trip or light rail, you can bring your bike on the bus and the light rail here in Denver. So I'll give each of you guys 2 tickets, and if you guys pledge to Bike to Work on Bike to Work Day or maybe some other day.